The safest version of Roman Reigns' bloodline is not some 10-man family tree with every cousin, brother, uncle, in-law, and fantasy-booked surprise shoved into one locker room angle. Now look, that is not me trying to get cute with it. That is the practical read if you have watched this business longer than one WrestleMania cycle and you know how promoters work when the big drawing money act needs to be rebuilt without making it feel like a rerun. You new fans get themselves worked into circles because the Bloodline name is so big now that everybody wants their favorite name attached to it. You didn't know folks were floating Naomi and Nia Jax by people trying to fantasy book a whole dynasty across divisions. And that just proves people forgot. The television alignment is still the strongest receipt. The safest version is Roman standing there with Jimmy Uso on one side and Jey Uso on the other, because that is the core people remember. Yahoo described Reigns and the Usos as the core of a reformed OG bloodline, and Wrestling Inc. noted that Reigns has already reunited with the Usos on TV. That matters, because in wrestling, what they show you on TV beats what somebody cooked up on a forum at midnight. Here's the thing about how WWE rebuilds major factions by anchoring them around a clear leader, reintroducing familiar members and stages, and using betrayal or rivalry to justify each shift. Roman Reigns does not need a crowd around him to feel important, but he needs the right people around him. Jimmy and Jey are not accessories because they are the proof that the old bloodline still has a heartbeat. Think about this for a second. Roman without the Usos is still Roman, still the main event guy, and still the man WWE spent years pushing as the centerpiece. But Roman with the Usos is the exact act that turned from a heel family angle into the biggest soap opera the company had in years. That is not nostalgia talking, that is the business talking. Jimmy was the loyalty test, and Jey was the emotional crack in the wall. Roman was the boss who could make family feel like a blessing one week and a sentence the next. That dynamic drew money because it felt like a shoot hiding inside a work. You knew it was wrestling, but you also knew family pressure like that does not come out of nowhere. Now watch what happens next when the old music hits. The same fans who say they want something new are the first ones to pop when the brothers stand together, and Roman does that slow walk like he owns the building. That is why Jimmy and Jey are the expected returnees, not because it is the flashiest answer, but because it is the one WWE already trained the audience to accept. If Roman says blood, fans look for Jimmy and Jey. Then there is Sami Zayn, and man, Sami is the one that makes this whole thing interesting. He is not blood, but he became part of the bloodline story in the one-way wrestling fans actually respect, because he got over with the people. Sami was the outsider who made the family angle breathe, which is why reports keep putting his name near the conversation. WrestleTalk listed him as a possible future fit, and that is the right level of caution. That is where a grown man keeps it, because you do not turn speculation into fact just because it sounds good in a thumbnail. But let's not pretend Sami is random. He is the top wild card because the audience already bought his history with Roman and the Usos. He was funny when the angle needed air, and he was loyal when the story needed warmth. Then when the turn came, he gave the whole thing its soul. Not many wrestlers can walk into a family faction where they do not belong and somehow become the guy half the crowd is watching. Sami did that, and that is why his name sticks. Now follow me on this part regarding the rebuild. If Roman is coming back to rebuild an OG bloodline, Sami gives WWE a choice. They can keep it family only to make the bloodline feel tighter and more serious. Or they can bring Sami near it and let the audience feel that old tension again. Does Roman trust him? Do Jimmy and Jey forgive him? And does Sami forgive Roman? That is good wrestling business because it gives you heat without needing a title belt on night one. It gives you promos, backstage angles, tag matches, betrayals, and hugs that might be traps. The less certain names are not worthless, they are just not the center. Solo Sikoa has history, and Jacob Fatu has the kind of presence that makes old school fans sit up because he looks like trouble before he says a word. Tama Tonga brings a different edge, but possible is not expected, and a promoter can tease 10 directions and still only trust 2 when the house lights go down. You do not dump everybody into the ring on one Friday night and ask the crowd to pretend it is 2021 again. The first answer is the Usos, and the second answer is Sami if WWE wants that old emotional wire plugged back into the wall. The Bloodline story only worked because it had layers. Roman was not just a heel champion. Jimmy was not just a tag guy. Jey was not just the brother who took the pin, and Sami was not just comic relief. Every man had a role that changed the temperature of the room. That is why throwing every related name into the same faction would be a mistake if they do it too fast. You do not rebuild a main event angle by turning it into a family reunion photo. You rebuild it by asking who Roman needs, who Roman fears, and who Roman can still control. Truth is, Jay is the key piece because his story with Roman carried the emotional load early and late. The fans saw him get bent, pushed, tested, and finally break away. If he comes back beside Roman, people will not see it as just another tag team reunion. They will ask what it cost him. They will ask whether he is choosing family or falling back into the same old trap. That is built-in wrestling heat because Jay gives the angle conflict just by standing there. Jimmy gives it a different flavor because Jimmy has always been the one who can make loyalty look messy. He can smile, joke, snap, turn, and still feel like family while he is doing it. That matters with Roman because Roman's whole bloodline run was built on loyalty being both sacred and dangerous. Jimmy beside Roman tells the audience the old house is not empty, and Jay beside Roman tells them the old wounds are not closed. Put both there, and the visual does the work. And this is the bit that makes the whole thing work. The likely version is not a monster expansion. It is Roman, Jimmy, Jay, and maybe Sami hovering close enough to make everybody nervous. That protects Roman's status and keeps the family core intact. It also leaves Solo, Jacob Fatu, and the rest as pressure points instead of clutter. Old promoters understood that you do not put every heater in the same corner unless you have a reason. You let the crowd wait, and then you hit them when the timing is right. Hogan and Savage did not need 12 guys standing behind them to make the mega powers feel big, and Austin did not need a committee to make Vince sweat. The best wrestling angles usually come down to 2 or 3 relationships that people understand in their bones. Roman and the Usos have that. Roman and a whole list of possible relatives needs careful booking, or it turns into noise. Name the bloodline moment people remember most. It is not a random expansion tease, it is Jay's struggle, Sami turning, and Jimmy making a choice. It is Roman holding court like a promoter and a patriarch rolled into one. The crowd remembers people, not spreadsheets. So when folks start naming every possible Samoan, ask yourself if that name adds a new wound, or does it just add a new body? Because Roman's bloodline never needed bodies, it needed wounds. Sami adds a wound, Solo adds a threat, and Jacob Fatu adds danger. But Sami adds the one thing Roman stories feed on, which is unresolved loyalty. Think about what Jey Uso actually watched. He was there when Roman made the bloodline mean power, making family loyalty feel like law. He was there when doubt got you punished. He was there when Roman held the top belt and the Usos held tag gold, making it feel like the main event had swallowed the whole company. He said nothing while the win started costing the family something. The pressure cooked until Jay stopped acting like Roman's soldier, giving the audience a babyface without WWE needing to explain it with a long promo package. That was the first real crack, and it felt like a shoot-feeling crack. Then Jimmy's betrayal added the part wrestling fans still argue about. Was he saving Jay, or was he scared of Roman's control? Whatever side you take, the move worked because it made the family feel unstable. You could not watch those segments and assume the brothers were safe anymore. It felt like Thanksgiving dinner after 20 years of resentment, and Jimmy making a choice gave it a different flavor. Now watch what happens next with the takeover. Solo started as the quiet heater and became something else. When Roman's grip weakened and Solo stepped forward, the bloodline no longer felt like Roman's kingdom. It felt like a new branch was taking the house while the old boss was gone. Roman went from untouchable tribal chief to the man outside his own family's new operation. Solo's version did not have Roman's slow burn authority. It had more street corner danger. It felt rougher and less interested in speeches. Jacob Fatu joining pushed that even harder, because suddenly the faction was not about Roman's cold control anymore. It was about who could claim the family name by force. Fans keep coming back not because WWE added names, but because the hook is inheritance. Who owns the bloodline? The man who built it, or the man holding it now? The original bloodline had structure with Roman at the top, Heyman at his side, and the Usos enforcing the kingdom. The new bloodline is acting like acknowledgement was already taken. Roman's version wanted worship, while Solo's version wants obedience. Between you and me, that is the kind of change WWE usually messes up by adding too many bodies and running too many turns. But the bloodline survived because every new piece had family weight attached to it. You knew Roman built a kingdom so strong that losing it became a bigger story than winning with it. You didn't know 3 wrestlers get put together, they interfere in matches, and they cut the same promo for 6 weeks before nobody remembers why they were together. And that tells you a faction without a leader turns into a pile of guys standing behind one entrance. A real faction needs a boss. Somebody the boys can orbit around and somebody the booker can build heat through. Roman Reigns did that with the Bloodline, which is why the angle lasted longer than most modern wrestling stories. Once Roman stopped being booked like a corporate babyface and started acting like a promoter's dream heel champion, he demanded acknowledgement. That one word gave the faction its spine. The Usos were his soldiers. Paul Heyman was counsel, Solo was the quiet hammer, and Sami was the outsider trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for him. That is leadership in wrestling. The Four Horsemen had Ric Flair as the money man and Arn Anderson as the spine. DX had Shawn Michaels first, then Triple H. In 1996, Hogan turning heel shook wrestling, and WCW gave it half the television show because Hogan gave the NWO the shock. The Bloodline worked the same way, only cleaner because Roman was the tribal chief. Once WWE locked that in, every scene had a question built into it. Who serves Roman? Who fears Roman? And who is brave enough to look him in the eye and say no? Roman's chapter was control. Jay's chapter was rebellion. Jimmy's chapter was betrayal. Solo's chapter is takeover. And the reunion chapter, if WWE handles it right, is not peace. It is negotiation under threat. That matters because fans can smell fake forgiveness quick. If Roman walks back in, hugs everybody, and the old music hits like nothing happened, people will cheer for one night and then start asking what the point was. The better story is harder, because Roman has to answer for what he built, Solo has to answer for what he stole, and the Usos have to answer for what they broke. The early Bloodline was a tight family power unit. The peak Bloodline became a company-wide control system, and the fractured Bloodline turned into a civil war. When Roman and Solo stand across from each other for the real final claim, who does the family acknowledge? The table had a head, and everybody had to decide whether they were sitting under him or coming for him. Here is the wedge, and people are going to fight over it. Which side are you on? The fans who think Roman needs the Bloodline to feel like Roman? Or the fans who think Roman has to stand alone now? Or the whole tribal chief run looks protected? Because you cannot have both. One side sees family as the draw, while the other side sees family as the excuse. You tell me which one WWE is willing to test when the bell rings and nobody is there to save him. The smart play is escalation. Start with Solo because that is the family bill. Bring Jacob closer because he is the danger in the room. Let the Usos fight through the tag division so the reunion has weight. Keep Cody close enough that every Bloodline win feels like it is heading toward the champion. Then when Roman thinks the house is back under control, let Punk walk in and make it ugly with words. Roman versus Solo tells you who owns the Bloodline. Roman versus Cody tells you who owns the top of WWE. Roman versus Punk tells you who owns the conversation. Those are 3 different fights, and Roman sits in the middle of all of them. Every old fan knows the NWO got bloated. At first, it felt dangerous, and then everybody had a shirt. The Bloodline avoided that for a long stretch, because the point was never hard to find. Roman wants control, family wants approval, and somebody eventually wants freedom. Older fans recognize this is not the exact same style as 1987, but the basic deal of making the crowd care who wins remains. It is not the exact same product as 1998, but you make me care who gets embarrassed in front of his family. When Roman controlled the room, everybody's identity was tied to him. Jay's pain was tied to Roman. Jimmy's choices were tied to Roman, and Solo's rise was tied to Roman. Once that control weakened, the faction had to split, mutate, or eat itself. That is the natural end of a power angle. Roman built a kingdom, and the throne decides everything. Ask how much actual heat a normal stable keeps after 3 weeks of recaps. Most angles need video packages, but this one does not, because you show Roman, you show Jimmy, you show Jay, and the building knows what it means. The reunion response proves that when fans warmed back up to the original Bloodline energy, they were not admitting the breakup failed. They were showing that the breakup gave the reunion value. A family coming back together only matters if it first got torn apart. Roman getting cheered in a more heroic light only matters because fans remember the heel run. Sportskeeda framed Roman possibly recreating the Bloodline on SmackDown, and that is the whole point. WWE does not have to invent a brand new machine when the old machine still has parts people care about. OB News framed it right when it said the reunion depends on purpose, evolution, and Roman staying compelling without overloading the story. Newsable pointed to hints around Roman and a possible reunion ahead of WrestleMania. Bleacher Report made the bigger faction point by looking at groups that stayed useful because they changed shape or made new stars. If WWE brings the Bloodline back because there is a new threat or a title chase that forces Roman and the family to make a business decision, then you have something. That feels like strategy. You knew Solo claimed the throne with a meaner face. You didn't know Jacob Fatu getting positioned as the wrecking ball turns the reunion into a civil war. And the minute Roman shakes hands with Jimmy and Jay, every other top name has to decide whether they are dealing with a family reunion or a hostile takeover. CM Punk is the wild card because Punk walks into any room and turns it into a promo fight. Cody Rhodes is the reminder that Roman's empire already cracked once. You cannot reunite the Bloodline and pretend Cody does not exist because Cody is the guy who walked through that story and came out with the prize. If Roman starts rebuilding the family, Cody becomes the measuring stick. The open loop is whether WWE books a new chapter or sells fans the old one twice. The Bloodline reunion can succeed long-term, but only if it has a real reason, keeps evolving, and uses Roman as the center instead of the cage. The next change only works if it still feels like family business.